and welcome to Our People, the podcast where we give space for Holdeman Stories. We focus on hope, healing, and inspiration. Connection, consciousness, and love are the driving motivations for this project. Remember to have grace for those who have chosen to speak out and share their experience. Please enjoy the story you will hear today. Hi, and welcome to Our People, where we give space for Holdemans, ex-Holdemans to tell their stories. I'm Weylin. I'm here today with Doreen. Doreen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Doreen. I was originally born in Grand Prairie. I'm the youngest of 7. I have 5 older brothers and 1 sister, and we grew up in a little town outside of Grand Prairie, about 45 minutes east, called Crooked Creek. I did want to say, I listened to some of your podcasts already, and something that Cam Isaac said really stuck out to me. There was definitely a hierarchy in that community. Unfortunately, we were near the bottom of that hierarchy. And it's sad because as kids, you know that you really feel it. You know that there are just some families that are cooler than yours. So we lived on an acreage. We had a cow. We always had pigs. My older brothers sometimes had a horse. 2 of my older brothers at different points, and then a different brother had a donkey at one point too. And then we had chickens as well that would lay eggs, and we had a quota. I don't remember if it was 300 or 350 chickens, but and then when they would lay eggs, we would sell them to neighbors. We'd take them. There's a couple restaurants in Grand Prairie that we supplied eggs to, sold milk. When butchered chickens, we sold that too. And that's how we supported ourselves in those years. One thing, Starla, too, she said something in her interview, and it just, when she said it, I had honestly never really thought about it before. And then she said it, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so how I felt. And it was about always feeling fear, always scared. For me, I don't actually ever remember as a child feeling safe. I was always just terrified. Um, the we had to go to, obviously, the revival meetings every year, and they would be preaching hellfire and brimstone and pounding the pulpit. And I remember I'd go home and I would think about, 4, 5, 6 years old, I would think about everything that I had thought or said that day or in the days past, and then, oh my goodness, I'm going to hell. One of my cousins or one of my friends had a really pretty dress, and I was jealous of that dress. I'm going to hell, and I remember it just constantly, always there in the back of my mind. I was never good enough. I was going to hell. And the abuse in our home made it even worse. Like it was always scared. I was either scared of that or being scared of hell, and it didn't matter. So I learned very young to be invisible. I learned to be what everybody else wanted me to be. I still learning, still working on trying to find out who I actually am, because you learn, to be what everybody else wants you to be. My parents were excommunicated when I was 11, that was due to child abuse. Some of my earliest memories were laying in bed, and I'd have my pillow over my head, and I'd be sorry, I get a little emotional.
Okay.
I'd be screaming into the mattress because I didn't want to hear my siblings' screams. Um, I won't go into it much more than that, but if you've read A Child Called It, the book, yeah, it was probably just as bad, sometimes in worse in different ways. Um, I always was scared that one day one of my siblings was going to get murdered. And I worship my older siblings. Like, and to this day, I have the best siblings in the world. And yeah, I just always just worship them. My parents always said, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." Another one of my dad's excuses for the abuse was saying that you have to break a child's will, not bend it, but you have to break it. And they tried to do that. Um, I I didn't get a lot of the abuse, the physical abuse. And simply that was because I learned to be what they wanted, to be invisible, to be quiet, to not rock the boat, to I learned to be what they thought I should be. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of it upsets me now because I'm like, I see some of my other siblings, they were not going to do that. They were, even at that young age, they were so fiercely brave and just stuck to their guns, and they suffered for it. Um, one thing I remember, my dad, he would get um, fiercely angry and depressed. At this point, I was a bit of a daddy's girl, and he would threaten self harm. Um, I remember standing on the lawn just east of our house, and I would have been about, I was young, like 4, 5, 6 years old. And I would see him walking away towards the muskeg, and I'd run after him, Daddy, Daddy, like, where are you going? Well, nobody loves me. I'm going to run away and never come back. Or he'd say, nobody here loves me, so I'm just going to go kill myself. And I remember as a little girl feeling that burden on myself because I didn't love my daddy enough. And now he was going to go and kill himself. Um, and of course, being that young and being that innocent, I believed everything he said. And
Right.
that has really stuck with me. Um, so my sister and I, we would take turns helping my dad grade the eggs for our chickens, like checking, taking out the cracks, anything that had a blood spot. And then we had this cool grader that weighed the egg, and then it would go into the little slots, small, medium, large. And us girls would package the eggs as they came down the little chutes. And it was fun. Actually, I really liked that. Um, and then when I was about, I'm going to say 6, maybe 7 years old, my dad didn't want me to help with the eggs anymore. I was never given a reason till later. Um, but I remember being like just totally hurt and heartbroken over it because I thought I had done something wrong. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what. Now I look back and I know the reason, and it just makes me ill, like just makes me sick.
Yeah.
Um, so I shared a bedroom with my sister through our growing up years, and I would hear sometimes that at one point we had beds on either side of the room, just single beds, but we also shared a double bed at one point, and we would roll up a blanket and set it exactly in the middle. And if a toenail even got of the other person's came over onto our side, it was like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would hear when Dad would come up to our bedroom at night. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard things. Being as innocent, naive as we were, I didn't know what was happening. Sex was just very taboo, right? You don't talk about it, you don't think about it, you
Right.
don't even, like, so naive. Um, Certain of my siblings, this is kind of silly, but horrifying at the same time. They would get beaten for having dirty thoughts, and I'm not even kidding. Um, and how my parents knew what they were actually thinking is beyond me. But my dad said that it would be because they had hair over their forehead, like there was some hair hanging over their forehead. So that meant they were hiding dirty thoughts. Yeah,
Okay.
I know
Wow.
it's a little bit batshit. Sorry, pardon my language.
That's fine.
It's kind of crazy. We were never taught the proper names of our body parts. It was that taboo.
Hmm.
Um, like my sister's the one who taught me a little bit about puberty. She gave me my first bras because she had outgrown them. Like my parents wouldn't even talk to us about that. So you were changing and you had no idea what was going on.
Hmm.
So in the spring of 89, 1989, it came out what my dad was doing. My mom always said no husband of mine would ever do that. Um, she said that it was actually certain other extended family members that did it. And my sister had been brainwashed to say it was my dad. She said it over and over to the point that I actually believed it.
Okay.
She was the one that did the brainwashing. And I didn't know what to believe. And I knew nothing about the relations between a man and a woman. So I had no clue that that's what I heard upstairs in our bedroom. I never saw anything happen because I kept pretending to be asleep. Um, at that time, the preachers would come by our house so often. They'd take my dad to the wood shop to chat, and they decided to excommunicate him. But honestly, that was it. There was no other repercussions. He was going to stay at the house with my sister. Um, so what I was told was that it was a certain cousin of ours who was not in the church who heard the story and decided to call the police and report it. Um, I've been told the name, but I've never actually asked the person, so I can't have proof that it was them. But you know what? If that person is listening, I want you to know that I'm thankful for you. You saved my sister from more abuse and potentially me from the exact same fate. So thank you. Um, I remember the police and social services coming to school talk to me, and that was when we were still in the Mennonite school. It's so very confusing and very strange. I really didn't understand what they were asking about. Um, in the end, my dad chose to plead guilty to reduce the punishment. He got 6 months in jail and 2 years probation, but he only served 3 months. I was 11 at the time, and mom forced me to go every week to the jail to see him, both Saturday and Sunday, and I hated it. And, and during this time, my mom told my sister that she was the fault that our home was wrecked. Um, she even went so far to say she was no longer her daughter. And I cannot imagine what she went through. Like, to have gone through all that abuse and then to be told that just because you chose to speak up just breaks my heart. So my sister moved to live with my uncle and aunt, and my mom refused to let me see her. She blamed her literally for everything. I started public school during grade 5, and that was a culture shock. Um, I was teased so bad because I was a Mennonite. My dad was a jailbird. I didn't know how to dress. We'd always worn homemade dresses. And my parents now didn't have money to get me new clothes because my dad was in jail. So some extended family members gave me some worldly clothes to wear, but they were for older ladies, not an 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
We left the community, moved to a small town outside of GP. My dad was released from jail about this time, and he moved because he still had 3 months left on his jail sentence. He had to stay in the men's hostel. And he started coming around to the house again, even though he wasn't supposed to be there till after his probation was up. We were only there before about a year, and then we moved into Grand Prairie. And all this time, I was not allowed to see my sister. Absolutely not allowed. My mom would not allow me to. When we lived in Grand Prairie, we had moved into a neighborhood right behind the Prairie Mall. And Grace would call. When she would get to the mall, she would call. And if mom would answer, she'd just hang up. Sometimes she asked to speak to me. Mom wouldn't let her. And when I was 15, the phone rang. And it had been 2 years since I saw her. And I answered it. And she said, "Hey, I'm at the mall. Do you want to come see me?" Well, yes, I do. And so I told my mom I was just going to go to the mall to meet some friends. And I went to see her. And it was just like that time just disappeared. She was more than my big sister at this point. She was also my best friend. And that has not changed. That meeting was when I finally stopped believing what my parents had told me.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many times I'd tell them I was going to stay at this friend's house or that friend's house, and I'd actually go to Crooked Creek to see my sister. She started opening up to me and all the lies that I'd been told. And I was 16, 17 at the time. I was very angry. I went through a horribly angry time. I didn't know who or what was true. I felt so betrayed by my parents. Especially about this time, I started understanding what had happened, what I'd overheard in our bedroom. I attempted to unalive myself several times. I would swallow large amounts of pills, go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and I'd be angry because I was woke up, and then I'd be sick, so sick.
Mm-hmm.
We we were taught not to have boundaries. Boundaries were bad. Um, I also learned very young that a woman was nothing without a man. Heard comments a lot about women who are unmarried and older being old maids, but it was very, very negative. There was always that very negative connotation to it. I knew. I knew I had to get married young. Um, my sister remembers, so going back a little bit, she remembers my mom coming into our room and tucking me in at night. And she always wanted to be tucked in, but my mom wouldn't. But by the time I got old enough to remember that, she had stopped tucking me in at night. So I honestly don't remember her tucking me in. But I do have one memory, and it was, 40 years later, it still just warms my heart. Grace and we were sent to stay at Uncle Dennis and Aunt Tina's house one weekend because my parents were in Fort Vermilion. Their daughter, Marva, is exactly 1 month older than myself. And we were best friends when I was still in the Mennonite school. We were getting ready for bed that night, and Aunt Tina came in and she helped Marva get undressed, and she hugged her and she kissed her, told her she loved her and to have a good night. And I was like, weird. And then she came over and did the same thing to me. And I'm like, it just meant so much to me because I'd never had a mom do that. So just meant the world to me. And I don't think she will ever know. I told her how much it meant to me just a couple of years ago, but I don't know if she'll ever really realize the absolute impact it had.
Mm-hmm.
So as a teenager, I had zero self-esteem. It wasn't just low, it was non-existent. Um, After we left the Mennonites, I really struggled to fit in um, anywhere. My mom was just angry all the time, still is.
Mm-hmm. A quick
Um,
question.
yeah, of course.
Okay, you said left the Mennonites. So when your parents got expelled, then they left, and
Yeah.
they didn't try
And
to
they,
get back in and do the whole
no,
cycle. Okay.
no, not at all. They were just gone and they took me with them.
Okay.
Um, my oldest two brothers were members already, so they had moved out and they were living together at that time. And then my sister moved in with my uncle and aunt, and then my three youngest brothers moved out with us.
Okay.
But in the end, my two youngest brothers did end up going back to the church. Um, so yeah, when I was a teenager, I turned into a party girl. Drank way too much, smoked way too much, cannabis as well as tobacco. I turned into a little bit of a tramp, and it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I thought I had to. I had to get someone to love me. I didn't feel I had a choice. I met my first husband when I was 17. Turned 18 in 1996 and graduated high school right afterwards. Um, about this time, my parents sold the house they were living in and bought a small trailer, and it had two tiny bedrooms and then a master bedroom. While my parents said, at this point, I assumed I was going to move with them. They said, yeah, we're going to take out the wall between the two rooms and it's going to be our big master bedroom. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, then I'll get the other room. No, we're going to turn that into the guest room. Okay, where am I going to go? Um, I was working at Pizza Hut at that time, didn't have a lot of money because I was still in high school, just graduating. And so I moved in with my boyfriend, Dennis. And my mom flipped out, of course. You know, we were living together, we were living in sin. Um, so I said, fine, then we'll go get married. We'll go to Justice of the Peace and get married tomorrow and you'll be fine. Well, no, she said she wanted a big white wedding because I know Grace will never have one. I want you to have one. So we said, fine, we would we would get married. We would have that big white wedding. So we got married a year later. Um, our life together was okay. Um, Honestly, I was numb doing what I
Mm-hmm.
thought I had to do. I had pushed all my feelings down. We had the most beautiful and amazing kids. Um, he went to post secondary, went to university, got his engineering degree. And to this day, I am so proud of him. He worked so hard for that. 2015 happened. People complain about 2020 and how bad 2020 was, but for me, it was 2015.
Mm-hmm.
My dad passed away that year on May 28th, and I wasn't expecting to feel the way I did. Um, I was honestly expecting to be relieved, and
Yeah.
I was absolutely heartbroken. I grieved so hard, and it was just for what could have been. You know, you have friends and they post such amazing things about their dads on Father's Day, and I can't.
Yeah.
I simply could not. Um, and I grieve for what us as kids never had. Then within days of his funeral, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she passed 2 months after that. Um, and it was about this time that all those emotions that I'd been holding back for 20 some odd years just came back, and I've never been able to stuff them back down. My therapist told me I wasn't ever going to be able to, and I'm like, rats.
Yeah.
Um, so by 2019, I was divorced and remarried. My second marriage, total love match. Um, and I did love Dennis too. I honestly did. But this time it was different because there was no outside pressures for me to marry Kevin. It was just did it for love. Um, so in 2019, mom's lived in a rather decrepit trailer in Ridge Valley. She had moved the one that her and my dad had bought into Ridge Valley, and it was falling apart. She was also doing pretty badly with just her cognitive abilities. As well. I don't know why I took that part so hard, because she had to move into a senior's lodge. But I actually, that was when I ended up in the hospital and I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I got into therapy and started meds. And honestly, that was when my healing started. And then another milestone in this healing journey was when I went with two friends to Mexico earlier this year. We went on an excursion, and a portion of this was going into a cenote. And the water, it was so hot. The water was so delightfully refreshing. It was beautiful. Our tour guide, he told us that in ancient times, warriors would go in there before heading into battle. They would leave their negativity and all their past stresses and stuff in that water. And then he said that if there's anything that we wanted to leave there, that we should. And I did. And I know it might sound silly, but it was probably, no, it was without a doubt the single most spiritual moment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a huge healing moment for me, and it's still continuing. But one thing I did, um, when I find myself thinking back to the past and, getting upset about the negative things that happened, I choose to remember the good times.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to remember the night all 9 of us were piled in our station wagon coming home from a revival meeting. And when we got out at the house to go inside, there was just the most amazing Northern Lights show, just beautiful. I remember my brothers helping me build a boat with scraps of wood, and we'd tie baler twine around a nail in the front. And that was so that we could pull them around in the puddles that collected on our yard. Playing kick the can at twilight with my siblings, and sometimes friends were there too. We weren't allowed in our dugout, but when my parents went to town, we'd go play in the water. It was fun. Playing anti over, picking fresh mint from our back lawn. But one thing I've noticed, um, all of those best memories, they include my siblings and not my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm just so very grateful that I was the one that got those 6 siblings. That I was blessed with them for sure. And that's where I'm at now.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's an incredible story. Um, would you ever share any of your attempts? I don't know what all attempts you made, but any attempts you would have made at trying to come to a place of acceptance, or yeah, acceptance, I guess, with your parents, either one of them.
Um, Through the years, some of my uncles and aunts have actually told me what my parents' life was like growing up. And because of that, I have forgiven them.
Okay.
I was able to be there beside my dad when he passed away. I was holding his hand. I have honestly can say I have forgiven them. It helped when I found out what they had gone through in their growing up years and the struggles that they had faced. I think like they really didn't have a choice but to turn out the way they did. Like there wasn't it doesn't surprise me. And
Hmm.
I've totally been able to forgive them because of it.
Yeah. I think I think you mentioned it earlier, but there never was really any acceptance on their part, was there?
No.
Yeah.
My mom is still very, very angry.
Hmm.
She's 83 years old, and I don't know that that will ever change.
Yeah. You talked about boundaries.
And that was the thing. Like, I remember growing up, and like, if somebody wanted you to sit on their lap, but they were older, you just simply had to,
Hmm.
even if it made you incredibly uncomfortable. You had to. You were not allowed to say no. Um, and even lately, like my mom, she'll say stuff like, sometimes my kids aren't always the touchy feely type. And she'll want to give one of them a hug, and they really don't want it. And she's made the comment, well, you're my grandchild. It's my right.
Hmm.
It's like, no, no, it's not. But that was kind of that was kind of the mentality growing up. Like you weren't allowed to say no. You weren't allowed to say no. This is my body.
Yeah.
And I'm not comfortable with that. And it has taken me, like, I still have issues setting boundaries.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and then you let people walk all over you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I found the same thing. That's difficult to do. Your your relationship with your siblings really stands out. Um, has there been any, I'm not sure how to ask this question. I think sometimes siblings who go through a lot of trauma can have to almost regrow relationships as they become adults. And I'm wondering, I think it either goes one way or the other. They either have very bad relationships that need to be reworked as adults, or maybe they're very close.
for me, like, I know some of my siblings, they butt heads a little bit, but I think that's what I don't think it's more than what would happen in a
Hmm.
normal family. But for me, my relationship with all of them is just getting closer and closer. Every year that passes, just getting closer. Um, and I think it is because we had that shared trauma.
Hmm.
I remember when my dad died, and I was so stressed out. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be so tough planning a funeral with 7 different opinions. And it
Yeah.
wasn't. We went to Oliver's funeral chapel. We sat around in a conference room, and we just decided how it was going to be. We all said our opinions, and that was that. It was just, it was so, there was no fighting, no arguing, nothing. It was really surprising to me. And then 2 months later, when my ex-husband's mother passed, his family just went totally the other way.
Hmm.
And to me, I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, some of them haven't even talked to each other since then. Like, it's
Wow. Yeah.
devastating.
Yeah. I know we talked about this a little bit before the recording, but you'd said about something about being Mormon. I'm curious more about your Mormon experience.
um, so my entire religious story begins probably about 7 or 8. I was about 7 or 8. And I prayed the sinner's prayer and accepted Jesus into my heart at a revival meeting. Um, and I remember feeling so free. I knew that us as kids would now be protected. I was going to pray. I was going to beg for that. And of course, I knew God was going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I felt quite invincible.
Yeah.
I had such faith back then, and we were all going to be rescued. And then we weren't. And that was really when I started questioning my belief in God, because it took several years after that. Um, then my parents, when we left the Mennonites, they wanted to we moved into town, and they started trying different churches. They ended up at this one church that they really liked, but I felt it was more of the same, like who was wearing the nicest clothes, who was driving the nicest car,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, mm. And it kind of turned me off at religion. Dennis and I got married in a Lutheran church, um, and that it was a small Lutheran church. I really liked it. Um, but then when we moved to Edmonton so he could go to university, we started going to a different Lutheran church. And at that Lutheran church, the thing that just turned me right off, a gentleman came in the back. Um, we always had like coffee, tea, juice, and cookies set out for
Mm-hmm.
fellowship after the service. And this he looked quite homeless. He came in the back, and um, instead of being invited into the sanctuary to sit and enjoy the service while he was enjoying his coffee, they kicked him out. And I remember being so angry about that. I'm like, why would you kick somebody out? Like, this is a church. Um, that was about the time I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really bad. Like, I was in and out of the hospital on a monthly basis. Um, and that was when the missionaries started coming around to our house. And I was doing really bad health wise. Dennis was in school, so we were struggling financially, but they were there. They
Mm-hmm.
introduced us to other members of the community, and they were just there for us. Um, some of the most lovely people. And so after my first surgery in 2005, we actually made the decision to join the Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the best Mormons. Like, we were paying our tithes, we were um, going to all the services. Like, we were doing Mormon work probably 5 out of 7 nights a week. Like, we were into it. Um, and they were always just right there beside us. If we needed groceries, they had the most amazing food bank. It was really an awesome community feel.
Mm-hmm.
um I worked at the Westin Hotel, and I on the background of my computer, I'd always have a Mormon temple picture. And every few months I'd get tired of that Mormon temple, and I'd switch it up because there's so many. And I was looking one night, I was bored, so I'm looking for a new temple picture. And at the very bottom, it said, "What is Mormonism?" And I was big into it. I believed it 100%. I wanted to know more. So I clicked on it and I started to read. And it was a very eye-opening experience. But I started writing things down. I'm like, this can't be right. They honestly cannot believe this. This is so far out there. And so I would start writing my questions down. Um, when you're in the Mormon church, every year before Christmas, you meet with the bishop
Mm-hmm.
and you just go over, are you having any struggles? Are you paying your tithes? Is there anything the church can help you with? And I had literally, from reading this, I had pages of questions, and I slid them across the desk to our bishop. And I was like, please tell me this isn't true, right? Like, and he said, by this time, we had been members for 7 months. We had already been to the temple and performed baptisms for the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he said, yes, it is all true, but usually we don't tell our members till their faith is stronger, till they've been members longer, and they're ready to hear that. And
Hmm.
that was it. We were done, because some of it was so, I still had, at that point, I still had a lot of the beliefs I was raised with.
Right.
And to hear their side of it was just so unbelievable to me that we just said, yeah, no, we're done. We're
Yeah.
done.
Do you remember some of the more shocking things?
Um, Part of one thing that really, really angered me was the whole thing where, so Mormons do not, the mainstream Mormon religion does not believe in polygamy on
Mm-hmm.
earth, on earth. But they believe, so say Dennis and I had got sealed in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get sealed in the temple, that is for time and all eternity. Your children are sealed to you. And then when you die, you and your children and your spouses, if there's more than one, will get your own planet, and
Mm-hmm.
you will be gods on that planet, and you will repopulate your planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember they said, so for instance, Dennis and I got sealed, we would be sealed for time and all eternity. If Dennis were to pass, I could never get sealed to another man. However, if I were to pass, Dennis could get sealed to another woman.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then both me and the other woman would be his wives in the next
Right.
life.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's kind of sexist. Like, why can the man have multiples and a woman can't? You know,
Right.
um, that was really something for me to kind of get my teeth into. That was one of the more interesting aspects of it. Um, there was and then if, for instance, my new husband and I were now to go back to the Mormons and get sealed, because I never did actually get sealed to Dennis, my children with Dennis would now become Kevin's children. Like,
Interesting.
it's
Huh.
so the kids go with the wives wherever the wives go. And it was just very, yeah,
Yeah.
very, very intriguing. Like,
Yeah,
just
that
the
is
whole,
interesting.
just the whole belief system around it. It was, um, and honestly, being in church or doing church activities like 5, sometimes 6 days a week, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you really didn't have time for your family. You didn't have time for any non-Mormon friends.
Mm-hmm.
You really didn't have much of a life
Outside
at
of it.
all
Yeah.
outside of it.
Yeah.
Very much so. And then the other thing was their sacred undergarments. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Once you get endowed in the temple, you have to wear them, and you have to wear them all the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
unless you're showering or bathing or going for a swim, you have to wear those undergarments. And I always thought that that was really odd, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's just, and then now, since after leaving it, I've gone on YouTube and I've found various other people, ex-Mormons,
Mm-hmm.
who've actually talked about the endowment ceremonies and the secret handshakes and the secret name that you're given,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm glad we got out when we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And getting out, actually, so what you do is you have to write a letter to your bishop, and he holds on to it. And I don't remember if it's for 30 days or if it's for 90 days, but he holds on to it so that you can change your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if you do not change your mind within that time, he will forward it to the stake president. And again, you have that 30 to 90 days to change your mind. Like I said, I apologize. I don't remember which one. And then after that, it gets sent on to Utah, where your name gets removed from the books.
Yeah.
So I don't know if in the Mennonites you can voluntarily leave like that. But I know the Mormons, actually, there had been a lawsuit against them because one of the members had wanted to leave, but they said no, like you can't just leave. So there was some
Hmm.
kind of a lawsuit, and so the Mormons had to now make a way for people to leave voluntarily.
Right. Yeah, that is the law.
Oh,
I don't think that's necessarily followed in the Mennonite Church, but yeah, that is the law that there has to be. You can't. Let's see. No organization that you can become a part of can hold you against your will. That's yeah. Wow. So, would you mind sharing like where you're at spiritually now?
um,
You don't
so
have to, but
as no, no, it's fine.
okay.
I truly do not believe in God.
Hmm.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. The reason is quite simple. And people, I've brought it up with so many people, and they're like, "Oh, but it's free will, free will, free will." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I'm a mom. If anybody or anything was hurting my child, even if I
Hmm.
couldn't do anything, I would try my hardest. I would throw myself in front of a train for my kids." Like,
Hmm.
and I sit there and I think about, either there's one of three things: either God isn't real, either that, or he's not all powerful, because if he was all powerful, um, then why wouldn't he stop some of the stuff that's happening? Or
Hmm.
he's not all good. Those are my three things. Like, if he was all good, but perhaps he can't stop, like he's not all powerful, okay. He's all powerful, but he's not all good,
Hmm.
or he just doesn't exist. Um, my husband now, he actually was a youth pastor, so down in the States. And so he is a Christian,
Hmm.
but I've talked to him and I said, like, okay, I get the free will aspect of it. Like my dad had free will, and he used that in a very bad way. But I said, okay, now let's think of something totally different. Let's talk about children's cancer.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nobody that's doing anything to these children who get cancer, who get leukemia, who get those, like where's the fairness in that?
Right.
So if God was all powerful, why is he allowing this to happen?
Right.
So it's just been a matter of respect for me. Like, if I can't respect a God that could see a child suffering and be able to stop it, and choose not to.
Yeah. Yeah, I know one of the things that gets brought up a lot is children starving. There's just looked it up here. It says 25,000 people, including, well, not, yeah, part of that number would be 10,000 children die per day from starvation. And to think that, I mean, I feel very much the same as you, to think that there's a loving being watching that. I don't see the loving part.
Exactly. I feel sometimes like we might be an ant farm.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
ooh, let's see what happens if we do this. What happens if we do this?
Yeah.
But I'm actually at peace with that.
Hmm.
And for the first time in my life, not having like the thought of hell hanging over my head, I feel more free now than I ever have.
Hmm.
Last year I had another major abdominal surgery, and I ended up in a coma for several days because I bled out on the operating table and stuff. And I told my husband after that, like, for the first time in my life, if something had happened that I hadn't been able to pull through that, I would be at peace with that,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I'm no longer scared. I'm no longer terrified of heaven or hell or anything like that. I'm me, and I'm living my life. And
Yeah. Yeah, I had a my my experience is kind of similar with the losing the fear of hell. I actually feel like life really started for me when I lost the fear of hell. Because until that time, I just thought, what does any of this matter? What does it matter? Like, just gonna die and either go to hell. And I thought heaven sounded just as scary.
Right?
Just spending on and on and on and on. I just, I couldn't, even as an adult. That scared me a lot as a child, but as an adult, it continued to scare me. Just could not comprehend that. And then, yeah, I I started realizing the importance of relationships and taking care of ourselves and so on when I lost that. Before that, I didn't see the point. Yeah.
I agree.
Um, there's a book, I believe it's called Love Wins by Rob Bell, and he talks about hell. And it's a really good book for looking up, kind of checking your beliefs on it. Well, that was I really enjoyed that, and I'm really glad you were willing to share. Um,
I told my husband if I could help just one person, if I,
mhm,
just one person, like know that there's hope out there, know that no matter what they're going through. I know my oldest child, one of their friends just turned 18, and just her funeral is Friday. She chose to end her own life. And I said, if I can help one kid out there, just one kid out there who's struggling like I am, who's angry, who's hurt, who's then it's going to be worth it.
yeah, yeah,
It's going to be so worth it.
yeah. And I think there's a certain help for ourselves when we share our stories. Um, I think that we're so silenced and so invalidated that getting to share your story can do a lot for you too.
I
Well,
agree. I felt it was an important part of the healing journey that I think I'm going to be on probably for the rest of my life.
yeah, yeah,
And that's okay because every day just gets better and better. And
yeah. Okay. Well, unless there's something else you really want to share, we could probably.
no, I definitely think that that's gives a rundown at least of my story, why I am where I'm at now and how I got here.
Mhm.
And I want to thank you, giving me this platform to share my story, to get it out there.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for listening. It is an honor to connect with our guests, and we wish the best for them as well as our listeners. Remember to like and subscribe for more episodes. Our People can be found on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. If you are interested in sharing your story, please contact us at ourpeoplepodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you.